He didn't correct her. He punished her. The back of Carl Benson's hand crashed across Mia Alvarez's face with enough force to snap her nose and send her knees buckling into shattered glass. Blood painted the hardwood in arcs, a broken tray of glasses scattered like landmines around her. The sound echoed, too loud, too final, in a room meant for laughter and low music. And then silence. Forks froze above plates. Conversations cut like wires. Even the jazz stuttered to a stop. 30 patrons, a full bar, a Thursday night crowd, and nobody moved. Except one man. In the far booth, dressed in black, tattoos curling down veined arms, a thick chain resting on a chest that didn't rise fast, Dante Moretti stood. Not hurried. Not angry. Just quiet. Measured. Like a man watching a countdown only he could hear. Carl didn't see him at first. He was still staring down at Mia, who pressed one trembling hand to her nose, blood leaking between her fingers. Her eyes didn't plead. They didn't break. They just locked onto the floor like it was the only safe place left in the room. Dante's boots moved slowly across the floorboards, soundless but absolute. One server backed out of his path like furniture. Another muttered, "Oh God," under their breath. Mia didn't lift her head until the shadow covered her completely. "You breathing?" Dante asked, voice like gravel soaked in steel. She nodded. Just once. Then Dante turned his eyes, and everything in the room shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't ask what happened. He already knew. And Carl Benson, manager, bully, loudmouth in a tucked-in shirt, finally looked up and realized just how badly he'd fucked up. "Office," Dante said, so quietly it made people flinch. "Now." Carl blinked, stammered, "You can't just. You've got 30 seconds, Dante interrupted, already walking. Use them to walk or crawl. And just like that, the Charred Oak stopped being Carl's bar. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Mia Alvarez had arrived in the city on a bus that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. The windows were fogged, the seats too cold, and every mile that separated her from where she came from felt like a small act of resurrection. She stepped off into the chaos of downtown with a duffel bag that had seen more shelters than bedrooms and a wallet that held 3 crumpled bills and an expired library card. Around her, skyscrapers cut the night sky into jagged pieces of light, and the air hummed with the sound of engines, sirens, and strangers. For the first time in years, she felt invisible, and invisibility, to Mia, meant safety. She didn't have a plan, not really. Just a list of places she'd circled on a printed job sheet from the shelter in Oak Ridge, and the name of a woman who had promised to make a call for her. That woman, Alma Ruiz, ran the shelter where Mia had stayed the last few months before leaving. Alma had seen her help clean the kitchen after others walked away, seen her step between 2 residents when a fight broke out over blankets. "You've got grit, kid," Alma had said, handing her a slip of paper. "When you get to the city, ask for the Charred Oak. Tell them Alma sent you." The Charred Oak didn't sound like a sanctuary, it sounded like a warning. But when Mia found it, nestled between a pawn shop and an old tailor's storefront, it was quieter than she expected. The sign above the door was faded gold, its letters curling like smoke. Inside, the air carried a faint mix of whiskey, polish, and tired laughter. She stood just inside the door for a moment, her duffel still slung over her shoulder, wondering how long it would take before someone realized she didn't belong. The manager on duty that afternoon wasn't Carl. It was a red-haired bartender named Maria, who had an easy smile and eyes that looked like they'd seen a few storms. "You're the one Alma sent?" she'd asked, already pouring a glass of water. Mia nodded, voice small but steady. Maria looked her over once, her wrinkled shirt, her worn shoes, the bruise on her wrist that hadn't fully faded, and said, "We've had worse walk through that door. Come back tomorrow. I'll introduce you to the boss." That night, Mia slept in a rented room barely larger than her duffel. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the window let in every sound from the street below. Still, it was hers, and that was enough. She wrote Alma's name in the small notebook she carried everywhere, A habit from the shelters: write down anyone who helps you, because kindness was a rare currency. Before she turned off the light, she whispered, "Tomorrow's the start." Carl Benson met her the next morning. He was all teeth and cologne, a crisp shirt with rolled sleeves, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "New hire," he said, glancing at Maria. "Guess we're letting anyone in these days." The words hit like a slap, but Mia only nodded, forcing a polite smile. She had learned long ago that some men didn't look at you, they looked for cracks. He handed her a uniform that smelled faintly of bleach and smoke and gave her a tour that felt more like a lecture. "We move fast here," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut. "You make one mistake and I'll know." His eyes drifted just long enough to make her uncomfortable, like he was measuring her worth against something invisible. Mia kept her gaze forward, memorizing tables, exits, and routes between the bar and kitchen. Silence, she'd learned, could be armor. By her third shift, she'd mapped the place by heart. The regulars came in waves, the quiet ones first, nursing bourbons at the bar, the loud ones later, laughing too hard and tipping too little. She moved between them with practiced grace, careful not to draw attention, careful not to trip. Maria taught her which customers to avoid and which ones would talk your ear off, but never mean harm. "Keep your head down around Carl," Maria added once, voice low. "He likes being watched, but not questioned." Mia didn't ask what that meant. She didn't have to. She'd seen enough of men like Carl to know how they built their power, one humiliation at a time, until everyone learned to laugh when they wanted to cry. Still, she needed the job. Needed the money. Needed the small sense of normal it gave her to wear a name tag and punch a time card. So, she smiled when expected and disappeared when it mattered. Her days blurred into one another, a rhythm of noise and exhaustion. The clatter of dishes, the sting of cleaning chemicals, the endless "yes, sir," and "coming right up." Some nights she walked home with her feet blistered and her uniform damp from spilled drinks. But she didn't complain. Every dollar she saved meant one step closer to something that looked like freedom. In a city that never slept, she was learning to breathe without looking over her shoulder. And yet, even in that chaos, she noticed things. The way the jazz cut out suddenly some nights when a certain man walked in. The way Maria's laughter softened into politeness when she poured whiskey for him. The way the staff glanced at the far booth, the one half hidden by shadow, where a man sometimes sat alone, nursing a drink that never seemed to empty. He never spoke loudly. He never stayed late. But when he was there, Carl straightened his tie twice as often and lowered his voice. Dante Moretti. She didn't know his name yet, only that everyone seemed to move differently when he was around. Even the air in the room seemed to tighten, as if the walls themselves knew better than to echo too loudly. Once, she caught his reflection in the bar mirror, tattoos twisting along his arms, dark eyes that saw everything without ever needing to search. Their eyes didn't meet directly, but something about that stillness unsettled her. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Because Mia knew what power looked like when it didn't need to announce itself. She'd seen it before, in foster homes where silence meant control and words were weapons. The difference was, this man didn't use his quiet to intimidate. His calm felt deliberate, dangerous, but not cruel. Like a storm that knew exactly when and where to strike. She wondered, briefly, who he was and why someone like him would sit in a place like the Charred Oak. On her first Friday night shift, the bar filled faster than usual. A group of businessmen took the corner booth, and laughter bounced off the brass railings like shattered glass. Mia worked double time, weaving through tables, the tray balanced above her shoulder. Sweat dampened her collar, and the weight of exhaustion pressed on her spine. Still, she kept moving because slowing down meant standing out, and standing out was dangerous. Carl hovered behind the bar, pretending to work, his eyes darting to every mistake, every drop spilled. "You missed a table," he'd snap. "That's 2 points off your record." The other servers avoided him when they could, their smiles practiced, their apologies automatic. Mia said nothing. She'd learned that words were wasted on men who enjoyed echoes of their own authority. But there were moments, brief, flickering ones, when she almost forgot to guard herself. When Maria told a joke between orders, when the piano player hit the right note, when someone left a 20 on a $10 tab. Those were the seconds that reminded her why she was still fighting to feel human again. To exist without being afraid of breaking something just by existing. That night, when she clocked out, the air outside was damp with rain. She leaned against the brick wall by the alley, breathing in the scent of city smoke and wet asphalt. For a second, she let her head rest back, eyes closed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Alma, short but warm. Proud of you. Keep going. Mia smiled faintly, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Trying, she whispered. The next morning, she arrived early, hoping to get a head start on setup. The dining room was still dim, chairs upturned on tables, the faint smell of disinfectant hanging in the air. She grabbed a towel, wiped down the bar, and caught her reflection in one of the mirrors. The bruise under her eye from bumping into a door 2 days earlier had almost faded. She told herself she'd start fresh today. New shift, new chance. Carl showed up 20 minutes late, coffee in hand and ego fully intact. Didn't think you'd last the week, he said casually, brushing past her. Most of you never do. Mia didn't look up. Guess I'm not most. He laughed, a short, cruel sound that made the back of her neck tense. We'll see about that. That night, the crowd would be heavier. The noise thicker. And somewhere in the back booth, a man in black would be watching, not because he cared about the service, but because he noticed everything. 2 weeks from that moment, his name would be the one whispered in fear when Carl finally learned what it meant to cross a line. But for now, Mia Alvarez was just a girl with a borrowed uniform, a healing bruise, and a fragile dream she was trying to protect. The city outside pulsed with a rhythm that didn't care who broke or survived. She adjusted her apron, tied her hair back, and stepped onto the floor for her first full night as a waitress at the Charred Oak. The lights flickered on, catching the shine of glass and the reflection of someone sitting quietly in the corner booth. Dante Moretti watched her take her first order. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't move, just observed. And somewhere deep in the hum of the bar, a storm began to gather, silent but certain. The kind that changes everything. Carl Benson walked into the office like it was still his. Shoulders squared, jaw tight, trying to resurrect some version of the authority he'd worn like armor just 10 minutes ago. But his step slowed when he realized Dante Moretti had closed the door behind them, not hard, but with finality. The air shifted inside the small room, like even the walls knew to brace themselves. Carl turned to speak, only to find Dante already there, already watching, already past the point of negotiation. The silence wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Heavy. The kind of silence that didn't beg for words, but warned against them. Dante didn't sit. He didn't lean. He simply stood with his hands relaxed by his sides, giving Carl the illusion of space, but none of safety. It was the quiet that came before a verdict, not a conversation. Carl opened his mouth to speak, but Dante cut him off with a single nod toward the desk. A thick manila envelope sat on the faux-wood surface, its contents fanned out just enough to catch the overhead light. Pay slips, falsified time cards, screenshots of adjusted inventory logs, even photos, Carl slipping cash into his pocket when he thought no one was watching. "I've had eyes on you for weeks," Dante said, voice low even. "Your theft didn't surprise me. Your arrogance did." Carl laughed. It was thin, brittle. "Look, you've got this all wrong. I've been managing this place on my own, covering shifts, fixing shortages, keeping it afloat. If a few things slipped through the cracks, you didn't fix anything," Dante interrupted. "You exploited a staff too afraid to speak. You skimmed from paychecks. You docked wages and pocketed tips. That's not oversight. That's rot." He took a single step closer, just enough for Carl to feel it. "You don't lead people, Carl. You corner them." Carl's mouth opened again, slower this time, like even his body was trying to stop the words. "They don't respect me because they're lazy. You think it's easy managing this kind of crowd every night? I had to lay down rules, keep order." Dante didn't blink. "You think fear is order?" he asked. "No one followed you. They endured you. There's a difference." His tone hadn't changed, but the weight of it had. like a man who'd said these words before, just before someone's entire life collapsed inward. Carl's eyes flicked toward the door. Not to run, not yet, but to check how loud he'd have to scream. Dante caught it and let the moment stretch. Then, with a slow, almost tired motion, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. It was a photo. A little girl, no older than 10, mid-leap on a ballet stage, pink tights, hair pulled into a perfect bun. Maddie, right? Carl froze. His face didn't fall, it cracked. I would never hurt a kid, Dante said, shaking his head, voice calm. That's not how I work. But I know where she rehearses. I know what time the recital is next Friday. I could sit in the front row, dressed like a proud uncle, and smile at you from across the room. And you'd know every second that your world is smaller than you thought. No, Carl whispered. This is insane. You can't. I'm not threatening her, Dante said, stepping forward. I'm reminding you what real power feels like. It's not shouting across a bar at someone who can't fight back. It's being able to destroy someone and choosing not to. Carl staggered back into the chair behind the desk. His hands, which had gripped the armrests with the confidence of ownership just days ago, were trembling now. What do you want? He asked. You're going to resign, Dante said. Tonight. You'll hand over the keys, the codes, and every login you've ever touched. You'll leave this place and never come back, not as staff, not as a customer, not even to piss in the alley out back. And if you speak about this to anyone, police, press, or your little drinking buddies, I'll know. Carl swallowed hard. And if I don't? Dante tilted his head slightly, like he was surprised the question even made it this far. Then I stop being nice. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Carl reached for a pen from the drawer, hands still shaking. I'll write the letter. You've got 10 minutes, Dante said, already turning toward the door. And Carl looked up. This isn't punishment, Dante added. It's mercy. He walked out without slamming the door. Just closed it quietly, leaving Carl behind in a room full of broken illusions and damning paper. Outside, the sounds of the bar resumed subdued, cautious, but steady. Dante stepped back into the world like nothing had happened, like the weight he carried never touched the ground. But those who saw him pass knew something had shifted. The kind of shift you don't clap for but remember forever. In the corner of the bar, Mia still sat with a damp towel against her nose. A server passed by and whispered, "He's gone." She didn't ask who. She just nodded. And the room, for the first time in a long time, felt right. When someone crosses a line they can't come back from, what do you believe matters more, justice or mercy? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Mia sat on a bar stool in the employee nook behind the kitchen, the hum of the walk-in fridge vibrating faintly through the floor. A folded napkin, soaked red at the center, was pressed under her nose. Her palms were still sticky from the blood, and though the stinging had dulled, her head felt like it was floating just outside her body. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. But every part of her felt made of glass. Voices moved like ripples through the front of the house, some hushed, some too bold. "Did you see her face?" someone whispered. "He just hit her." Just like that. Another voice answered, lower this time. She didn't even scream. And beneath all that chatter, something else buzzed, not just shock, not just gossip, but awe. Because whatever Carl Benson had been before, whatever throne he imagined he sat on, it was gone. The moment Dante had told him, office. Now, everything in the room had shifted. The balance of power, the one that had loomed over every server like a thundercloud, cracked open. Mia hadn't seen what happened inside the office, but the look on Carl's face when he walked out had told enough of the story. His lips were pale, his jaw slack. A man freshly gutted, stripped of whatever illusions had kept him standing. A shadow fell across the break room doorway, and Mia stiffened before recognizing the familiar red curls. Maria stepped in gently, holding a glass of water and a small tub of antiseptic wipes. "I've got a real first aid kit somewhere, but this'll have to do for now," she said softly. Mia nodded, lowering the napkin. Her voice came out smaller than she expected. "Thank you." Maria didn't ask if she was okay. She just crouched and handed her the wipes, then sat beside her with a sigh like she'd been holding her breath all night. He's gone, she said after a beat. Gone as in fired? Mia asked. Gone as in he walked out the back door carrying a box and didn't look at anyone, Maria replied. And he won't be coming back. Not after what he did. Not after who saw it. Mia blinked. Who saw? Maria tilted her head, gesturing back toward the bar. Booth in the corner. Black shirt. Sleeves rolled up. Chain around his neck like it means something, which it does. Mia didn't have to look to know who she meant. She'd felt the shift in the air the moment he stood. The man whose silence had weighed more than Carl's threats ever could. Dante Moretti, Maria said under her breath, like speaking his name too loudly would summon something. One of the silent partners. Owns about half the place, through other names, of course. Mia stared at her. I thought Vincent owned the Charred Oak. He does, Maria said. Publicly. On paper. But Vincent's not dumb. Places like this attract all kinds. He needed backing. Someone who could make sure nobody messed with the staff, the product, or the name. So, he brought in someone who didn't ask for a seat at the table. He brought the table with him. Mia pressed a cold wipe to her cheek, the sting grounding her. He saw everything? Every second, Maria confirmed. He doesn't talk much. But he notices everything. The minute you hit the floor, he was on his feet. The weight of that sunk in slowly. Mia hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. But someone had still stood for her. Not out of pity. Out of principle. For the first time since she'd come to the city, Mia felt something shift, not around her, but inside her. The old instincts told her to leave, to disappear before the next bad thing found her. But something quieter, steadier, told her to stay. To reclaim the floor Carl had tried to break her on. When the bar closed that night, most of the patrons had left without finishing their drinks. A few lingered, offering awkward nods or mumbled take cares as they passed Mia. No one said Carl's name. No one needed to. The silence he left behind was louder than any apology could have been. Mia stayed. She didn't clock out. Didn't ask if she had to. She just started wiping down tables, collecting glasses, stacking plates like it was any other night. Maria watched her from the bar, shaking her head with a smile. You're something else, she muttered. It hurt to move, her back sore, her arms trembling from delayed adrenaline, but she did it anyway. Because pain didn't scare her. She'd lived through worse than a broken nose. What scared her was leaving the place and letting that moment define her. By midnight, the lights were low and the chairs were stacked. The kitchen had gone quiet, and the scent of lemon cleaner had replaced the blood and bourbon. Mia wiped the last table and turned to find Dante Moretti standing in the hallway, just beyond the employee entrance. He didn't say anything. Didn't beckon or step forward. He just watched. Mia held his gaze this time. Not defiantly, not fearfully. Just present. And after a long moment, Dante nodded once. A small gesture. But it landed like a promise. Then he turned and left. And Mia, still aching and bruised, finally exhaled. Not because the danger had passed, but because she knew, without a doubt, that someone had seen her. And for the first time in a long time, that meant she wasn't alone. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Mia's small apartment, catching the dust in thin golden lines that cut across the floor. Her alarm had gone off twice, but she hadn't moved, not really. Every muscle in her face ached from the night before, and the faint purple bruising under her eyes made her reflection in the mirror look like someone else. She had cleaned the dried blood from her nose, brushed her hair back, and sat in silence for nearly an hour, trying to decide whether to go back to sleep or never close her eyes again. When her phone buzzed, she jumped. The message was short. This is Dante. Meet me at Cafe Verona. 10 a.m. There was no question mark, no greeting, just instruction. She read it twice before typing a hesitant reply that she deleted twice over. What did you say to someone like him? Okay felt too casual, yes, sir felt wrong, and thank you felt like a trap. In the end, she sent nothing at all. She just stood, pulled on her jacket, and left. Cafe Verona sat 3 blocks from the Charred Oak, tucked beneath the awning of an old brick building that smelled faintly of rain and espresso. It was the kind of place where people came to disappear, quiet corners, muted lighting, and coffee strong enough to make silence feel intentional. Dante was already there when she arrived, seated near the window, black shirt rolled to the elbows, tattoos like hieroglyphs carved into skin that told stories no one dared to ask about. His expression was calm, unreadable, but the chair opposite him was already pulled out. "Sit," he said simply. Mia obeyed. She lowered herself into the chair, the legs scraping faintly against the tile, the sound swallowed by the low hum of conversation around them. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. He just studied her, the bruise on her cheek, the swelling under her nose, the way her hands folded tightly in her lap like she was afraid to take up space. When he finally spoke, his tone was level, almost conversational. "Doctor's visits already covered. The bills handled." "I didn't ask for that," Mia said quietly. "I know," Dante replied. "That's why I did it." He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small black notebook on the table. The cover was worn leather, edges softened by use. "You've been surviving," he said. "I can show you how to thrive." The words landed heavy, and for a second, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. People didn't just say things like that, not without wanting something back. "Why me?" she asked, the question sharper than she intended. "You don't even know me. I'm just a waitress who dropped a tray." Dante leaned back slightly, folding his arms. "That's not what I saw." His eyes didn't waver, and for a moment, Mia felt like he could see through her defenses, straight into the places she didn't let anyone look. "You got back up. No screaming. No pity. Just control. I've seen men twice your size crumble under less. You didn't." She looked down at her hands, at the tiny scar on her knuckle that had never faded from the night she fought off someone who thought she couldn't. "Getting back up doesn't mean I'm strong," she murmured. "It means you're still here," Dante said. "That's enough." The waiter arrived then, placing 2 coffees on the table. Mia hadn't ordered, but it was already black, just how she liked it. Dante didn't touch his drink. He was still watching her, but not in the way Carl used to. There was no weight of ownership in his gaze, only assessment, curiosity, maybe even respect. It was disarming in a way she didn't know how to process. "I don't do charity," Mia said finally. "If this is about pity, pity's useless," Dante interrupted. "This is about potential." He slid the notebook closer to her. "You've got instinct. You read a room before you walk into it. That's rare. Most people react. You observe. I can work with that." She stared at the notebook like it was something dangerous. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Learn," he said simply. "I'm short a floor manager. Vincent will fill the title officially, but he needs someone with eyes that actually see. You'll shadow him for a few weeks. Keep things running right. Learn the trade. You'll make mistakes. I'll be watching." Mia blinked. "You're offering me a job? After what happened?" "I'm offering you a chance," Dante said. "A title's just a name. How you earn it, that's what matters." She exhaled slowly, the weight of the words pressing on her like a test she hadn't studied for. "Why me?" she asked again, quieter this time. Dante smiled faintly, a rare break in his stone composure. "Because you didn't wait for someone to save you. You stood up bleeding and finished your shift." He reached into his pocket again, pulling out a set of small brass keys, clean, polished, cold. "The office," he said, placing them beside the notebook. "You'll need them." Mia stared at the keys, then at him. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "You don't even know if I can handle it." "That's what probation is for," Dante replied. "Start Monday. If you're good, you stay. If you're not, you leave. Simple." She hesitated, then said softly, "I don't want favors." Dante's gaze sharpened, but his tone stayed calm. "You're not getting one. You're earning one. There's a difference." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled by, and sunlight spilled across the floor in thin stripes. Mia looked at the notebook again, then reached for it, fingertips brushing the soft leather. She could feel the weight of the decision beneath her hand, like touching something that could change the shape of her life. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Okay," she said. "But if I do this, I do it right. No shortcuts." "That's the only way," Dante said. He pushed his untouched coffee aside, stood, and adjusted his cuffs. One more thing, don't thank me. Gratitude fades. Proof doesn't. Mia nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching into something that almost looked like a smile. Then I'll prove you right. Dante gave a single nod of approval, slid his hands into his pockets, and walked toward the door. For a brief second, as he stepped into the sunlight, Mia thought she saw something rare, something almost human in the way his shoulders relaxed. But then he was gone, swallowed by the city. She sat there for another 10 minutes, the coffee cooling, the keys cold in her palm. When she finally rose, she slipped both the notebook and the keys into her bag and walked out into the street. The world felt a little different now, not softer, but clearer. Mia Alvarez had spent her whole life surviving. For the first time, someone was asking her to build something instead. Do you believe second chances are earned or given? Drop your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to see how Mia handles hers. Carl Benson didn't go quietly. He smiled on the way out, forced, rigid, but behind the smirk was something dark and blistering. The box in his hands looked like it carried personal junk, a framed photo, a coffee mug, a few scattered receipts. But tucked in the lining beneath the mug, folded and sealed in plastic, were 3 sets of documents he was never meant to keep. Contacts. Financials. A slim USB drive filled with vendor names, payout schedules, and surveillance timestamps from the Charred Oak's back office. He'd always known the bar was bigger than it looked. Places like that didn't run smooth because of clean floors or happy staff. They ran on something unspoken, money that came from somewhere else, protection that cost more than tips, silence bought in monthly retainers. Carl hadn't known exactly what Dante Moretti was until the night he saw his own reflection in the man's eyes, and by then, it was too late. But walking out of that office bruised in pride and stripped of his position had lit something old and dangerous in him. Humiliation was a flame that burned slow. Carl's mistake wasn't in getting caught, it was in thinking he could still win. 2 nights after leaving, he sat in the corner of a strip mall bar with a man named Trellin Vega, who reeked of aftershave and ambition. Trellin ran with a crew based 3 neighborhoods east, small-time operators who'd been trying to edge into territory too big for them. Carl slid the USB across the table like he was passing off a weapon. "This is everything," he said. "Names, money trails, how he launders it through the place." Trellin looked unimpressed. "You really think someone like Moretti leaves a paper trail?" Carl leaned in, smug. "I think he doesn't expect small men to come back swinging. I worked under him for months. I saw who came through, who paid cash, who looked over their shoulders. That bar is his weak spot, and this gets you in." But what Carl didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the entire drive was bait. 3 weeks before Carl ever touched it, Dante had already suspected him. Quietly, methodically, he'd had a systems tech plant the right kind of evidence. Nothing direct. Just enough real to get Carl interested, and enough false to trace where he'd take it. The logs had been marked, encrypted, and tagged with a small packet of code that pinged Dante's burner phone the moment it was accessed outside of the Charred Oak's network. So when Carl handed over the drive and Trellin opened it on a laptop in the back room of an old betting shop, Dante's phone vibrated 3 times in the pocket of his coat. He didn't answer right away. He was at dinner, quietly seated across from Vincent in a steakhouse where names weren't used and the waitstaff never asked twice. Instead, he wiped his mouth, took 1 sip of bourbon, and nodded once. "It's time," he said. Vincent leaned forward. "Clean or messy?" "Silent," Dante replied. "Make sure he understands." The call went to a man named Corso, who didn't carry guns and didn't raise his voice. He carried a razor. In the span of 12 hours, Carl Benson lost his bank access, his pending apartment application, and his job offer from a bar uptown that had seemed like a sure thing. The recruiter he'd charmed ghosted him. The friend he'd called for a couch to crash on suddenly stopped answering. By the end of the day, Carl stood outside a payphone in a neighborhood that smelled like rot and gasoline, dialing old numbers that went nowhere. Trellin, for his part, never contacted him again. Rumor had it, the files had been traced back to Trellin's crew, who suddenly found themselves under quiet scrutiny from city regulators and 3 missing clients. Carl had assumed information was power. He didn't realize that in Dante's world, the wrong information was a loaded trap, and touching it meant being marked. Not for death. For something worse. Obsolescence. Carl's final attempt came at a corner office of a failing sports bar, resume in hand, desperation now bleeding through his once confident voice. I managed a place downtown for 3 years. Turned it around. Increased profits. Staff management, vendor contracts, you name it. The man behind the desk tapped a pen against a half-filled application. What was the name of the bar again? Carl hesitated. The Charred Oak. The man's eyes changed. Not narrowed, just flatlined. He closed the folder. We're not hiring right now. But the sign outside, we're not hiring you. Carl didn't ask why. He didn't have to. That night, he sat alone on a bench across from a pawn shop, the street lamp above him flickering like a warning. His phone battery was dead. His jacket thin. His pride, the thing that once carried him through rooms with sharp words and tighter fists, had dissolved into something bitter and brittle. He thought about calling his daughter. About asking for something he hadn't earned. He didn't. At the Charred Oak, Maria posted the new employee board in the break room. Mia's name was listed as assistant floor manager, probationary, under a line that read, "No tolerance for abuse. No second chances for cruelty." The bar ran quieter now. Smoother. And though no one said Carl's name, the memory of him was scrubbed out of every corner he once touched. Dante walked through the bar that weekend, silent as ever. He paused once at the host stand, scanned the staff working the floor, and nodded to Maria without a word. She nodded back. In his world, justice didn't come with sirens. It came with silence and a warning no one dared to ignore. The probation started with no ceremony, no speech, just a clipboard with a schedule and a black apron folded tighter than a secret. Mia Alvarez read the shifts twice, noted where her name had replaced Carl's, and showed up 30 minutes early anyway. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just wired that way now, precision as a defense mechanism, structure as survival. Her nights were long, her legs ached more than they ever had, but something about the exhaustion felt earned. Vincent was the one she technically reported to, but it was Dante who watched from a distance. He didn't hover, didn't correct, didn't even speak unless necessary. But when he did, the words stuck. "You're not here to fill Carl's shoes," he told her on her second shift. "You're here to burn them." And she understood. She wasn't managing people with control. She was learning how to lead with presence. The first lesson came during service, not about drinks or timing, but about reading the room. "Start with posture," Dante murmured one night as they watched the floor from the shadows of the hallway. "People who cause problems puff up. People who lie shrink. People about to run stop blinking." Mia didn't respond right away. She was watching a man at table 6, tapping his foot while his date nervously adjusted her napkin. "He's about to yell," she said quietly. Not because of her, because she's about to leave him. Dante didn't smile, but there was something approving in the tilt of his head. "Good. Keep going." By the second week, she was studying not just guests, but staff, who moved with tension, who whispered in the cooler, who smiled, but didn't mean it. She learned how to notice the moment before something went wrong, the shift in weight, the grip on glass, the pause before a tray dropped. It was like learning a language that had been spoken around her whole life, one she was only just now fluent in. "Prevention is quieter than cleanup," Dante had told her. "And smarter." He handed her the ledger book on a Wednesday, without introduction. "Start with the deliveries," he said. "Then the vendor contracts. If you're going to run a place, you need to know where the rot starts." Mia had never balanced books before, but numbers didn't lie the way people did. She took the notebook home and spent 2 nights cross-referencing supplier costs with weekly pours. By Friday, she'd found 3 discrepancies, a double-charged shipment, and a missing case of scotch that had never been logged. Vincent glanced at the spreadsheet she printed and let out a low whistle. "You're not here to impress me, are you?" "No," Mia said simply. "I'm here to make this place better." The moment that tested her came without warning. Saturday night, full house, jazz humming through the speakers, bar packed shoulder to shoulder. A server named Callie, newer than Mia, softer around the edges, was walking a tray of drinks toward the patio when a regular with too many bourbons and too few boundaries reached out and grabbed her waist. The tray clattered. Callie gasped. No one else saw it happen, but Mia did. She didn't shout. Didn't storm. She walked over, took the man's drink off his table, and set it aside. "You're cut off," she said evenly. "And you're leaving." The man laughed, greasy and loud. "You can't tell me I can," Mia said, locking eyes with him. "And I just did." He stood halfway before realizing no one was standing with him. Even his friends had gone quiet. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just waited. And something about the way she stood, calm, measured, unbothered, made him sit back down. "Get your coat," she said. "You're done here." Callie was in the back office 15 minutes later, eyes red, voice shaking. "He touched me like I wasn't even, like I was part of the furniture." Mia didn't say "I know." She didn't have to. Instead, she handed her a water, crouched in front of her, and said, "He won't come back. Not now. Not ever." Callie looked up, tears cutting down her cheeks. "Why'd you step in?" Mia answered without thinking. "Because someone once did for me." That night, as the staff cleaned up, Dante walked through the bar in silence. He didn't need to ask what happened. Word traveled fast in places like this, faster than spilled drinks, faster than broken glass. He waited until the lights were low and the last guest was gone before speaking. "You handled it," he said, leaning against the bar, arms crossed. Mia nodded. Quietly. "No damage. No scene." Dante studied her for a moment, eyes like stone carved with meaning. Then he said it. "Protection isn't force. It's presence." She let the words sink in, not just as advice, but as truth. That's when she understood this job wasn't about replacing Carl. It was about rewriting the rules he thought he'd written in ink. Mia had almost convinced herself that the past was a place she'd buried properly. Between ledgers, double shifts, and quiet nods from Dante, the rhythm of her new life had begun to settle. The Charred Oak felt like more than a job now. It was structure, meaning, a place where she was respected without needing to prove herself every hour. But some ghosts didn't need doors to return. Some of them simply walked through the front, bold as anything, with a smile that belonged in nightmares. His name was Riker. She hadn't heard it in years, but it tasted the same, sour, sharp, and dangerous. He was older now, heavier around the face, but the swagger hadn't faded. "Heard you got fancy," he said, sliding onto a bar stool without waiting to be invited. "Look at you. Clean shirt. Keys on your hip. Boss lady." Mia froze mid-step, tray in her hand. The noise of the bar dulled around her like someone had dropped a dome over the room. Riker's voice hadn't changed, and neither had the way he looked at her, like she was something he owned once, something he could pick up again. She set the tray down carefully, her fingers curling tightly at her sides. "You need to leave." Riker laughed, that same cruel chuckle she remembered from the group home back in Edison Heights. "Relax, sweetheart. I'm just visiting an old friend." He pulled a small folder from his coat and patted it. "Or maybe just here to remind you where you came from." Inside that folder were copies, printouts of arrest records, police reports, notes from her time in the system. Old, petty crimes. Shoplifting. A warning for assault after she'd fought off a foster brother who got too close. Nothing violent. Nothing recent. But still enough, if twisted, to raise eyebrows in the wrong hands. "You worked hard to scrub this clean," he said, his voice low now, his smile wider. "Be a shame if someone dropped it on the desk of a liquor license board. Or that guy in the booth you're always trying to impress." Mia didn't speak. She just stared at him, chest tight, breath shallow. Riker leaned in, breath hot with alcohol and old smoke. "A few grand. That's all I want. Clean, quick, and I walk." "I don't have that kind of money," Mia whispered. "You will," he replied. "I'll be back Thursday. Don't make me come find you." He stood, tossed a bill on the counter, and walked out like he'd just closed a business deal. Mia didn't move for several seconds. She heard her name once, Maria, asking if she was okay, but her feet had already carried her to the back office. She closed the door and leaned against it, trying to slow her pulse. Her hands trembled, Not with fear, but with something harder. Shame. She didn't tell Dante. Maybe she should have. But something in her still believed this was her mess to fix. If she brought him this, would she lose everything she'd worked for? The Charred Oak wasn't just a job, it was her clean slate, her first shot at becoming someone new. Riker knew that. That's what made the threats so precise. So she made a call. Used an old prepaid phone she kept stashed in a drawer, the number she hadn't dialed in 2 years. "I'll meet you," she told Riker. Friday, 8 p.m. Under the old Edison viaduct. He agreed too quickly. "Smart girl," he said. Friday night came, cold and sharp. She wore dark jeans and a thick hoodie, her pockets empty except for bus fare and a burner phone. The viaduct was exactly as she remembered it, wet concrete, broken glass, and the echo of trains long since rerouted. When she arrived, he was already there, leaning against a rusted pillar. But he hadn't come alone. 2 men stepped out from the shadows, muscle, younger, blank-faced. Riker smirked. "Thought you might bring backup, so I brought some of my own. Can't be too careful these days." Mia's chest tightened, her fists balling slowly. "You said just you." "Plans change," he said, shrugging. "Now let's talk business." Before he could take a step closer, a voice sliced through the space like a switchblade. She didn't come alone. The 3 men turned. From the dark, a man stepped forward. Heavy coat, gloves, and calm as ever. Dante's associate, Rafi, the one who always seemed to be just passing through the bar, chatting with Maria, wiping down bottles that were already clean. Now, there was nothing casual in him. "Walk away," Rafi said to the 2 hired men. Now, they didn't need convincing. One look, and they backed off, muttering apologies as they vanished into the dark. Riker stood frozen, mouth half open. Rafi stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "You're not going to threaten her again. You're not going to speak her name again. And if you ever even think about walking into that bar, I will personally make sure you forget how to walk." Mia watched, stunned, as Riker's face lost all its color. Rafi leaned in, lowered his voice. "You think she was unprotected? You think no one saw you the second you stepped foot near her? We've been watching, Riker. From the moment you opened that damn folder." Without another word, Rafi took a photo from his pocket and held it up. It showed Riker, earlier that week, handing someone the folder in a bar parking lot. The angle, the clarity, it was professional. "I suggest," Rafi said calmly, "you forget she exists." Riker stumbled back. He tried to speak. Failed. Then turned and ran. The echo of his footsteps faded into the viaduct shadows. Mia stood there, frozen, breath coming in short waves. Rafi turned to her. "You should have told us." "I didn't want to bring trouble to the bar," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Trouble already knew where to find you. That's why we stand in the way." When they returned, Dante was waiting. He didn't yell. Didn't ask questions. He just looked at her with that same unshakable calm and said, "You don't walk alone anymore." Mia's throat tightened. "That's not weakness," he added. "That's family." And for the first time, the word didn't scare her. It felt like safety. It felt like a promise. Have you ever tried to face something alone that you should have shared with someone you trust? Tell us in the comments, and if Mia's story hits close to home, subscribe so you don't miss what she builds next with the family she never thought she'd have. The Charred Oak didn't feel like the same bar it had been 2 months ago. The air had shifted, less heavy, less haunted. Conversations flowed easier, laughter came quicker, and the staff moved with something closer to confidence than caution. Mia noticed the difference in the smallest details, the way Callie no longer flinched when passing male customers, how Danny whistled again during prep, even the way the regulars looked at her now, not with suspicion, but with trust. Respect had replaced fear, and Mia had become the quiet engine driving that change. It started with the training manual. A simple binder at first, filled with protocols, notes, and schedules, but Mia poured herself into it like it was a blueprint to rebuild more than just a bar. She added conflict resolution tips, daily checklists, even sections about spotting harassment before it started. "We don't just serve drinks," she wrote in the intro. "We serve safety, clarity, and consistency. Everything else is garnish." Maria read it cover to cover and hugged her when she was done. Then came the supply issue. A few numbers hadn't added up, minor stuff at first. A missing case of vodka here, an invoice that seemed inflated there. Mia tracked every bottle for 2 weeks and found the leak, a delivery driver rerouting high-end inventory to a rival bar in exchange for cash under the table. She didn't blow it up. She reported it quietly to Vincent, provided documentation, and suggested a new vendor. Within 3 days, the deal was locked, and the bar was saving 12% on orders. Her reputation spread without effort. Customers asked for her by name. Staff copied her pacing during shifts, her tone when diffusing tension, even the way she tucked her towel at her hip. She didn't ask to be followed. She just led the way she wished someone had led her when she'd started. Quietly. Firmly. Always watching. So when Dante pulled her aside one Wednesday night after close and said, "Dinner. Back room. Wear black," she didn't question it. The back room was nothing like the rest of the bar. It was quieter, cleaner, more deliberate. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, dim lighting that felt more like a meeting of minds than a mafia den. Dante sat at the head, of course, but flanked by men and women whose names Mia barely knew, some dressed like executives, others like they hadn't changed out of their mechanic uniforms. When Mia walked in, everyone paused. Dante didn't introduce her as the new floor lead. He stood, hand motioning to her with something more than courtesy. "This is Mia Alvarez," he said. "She's not an employee. She's one of us." No applause followed. Just nods. Eye contact. The kind of silent acknowledgement that carried more weight than words ever could. They ate, discussed logistics, talked about vendors and territories, and things Mia only half understood. But no one talked down to her. No one second-guessed her presence. When she asked questions, people answered. When she offered suggestions, they listened. After dessert, an espresso and a slice of something warm and sweet, Dante turned to her. "We need a new floor manager," he said. "Not temporary. Not interim. Real title. Real salary. Full benefits." Mia looked at him, then around the table. "Is this a vote?" "No," Dante said. "It's already decided. I don't offer power to people who have to be convinced to take it." Mia let the words settle for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I accept," she said, "on one condition." Dante raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "I want hiring power," she said. "Full say on who gets through the door. I want to bring in people like me. The ones who don't get second chances anywhere else. The ones who come from nothing, carry everything, and still show up early. You trusted me. Let me do the same for them." For a second, the room was still. Then Dante leaned back in his chair, smiled, not wide, but real. "Deal." Maria toasted with a glass of wine. "About damn time," she said. That night, as Mia walked home with the city humming around her, the keys in her jacket pocket felt heavier. Not because of weight, but because of what they unlocked. For the first time in her life, she wasn't surviving. She was building. A year passed, and the Charred Oak had become something else entirely. Not just a bar, not just a place with low lighting and smooth jazz, it was a haven. The kind of place people returned to, not for the drinks, but for the way it made them feel. Seen, safe, steady. The staff walked taller, the regulars lingered longer, and laughter had become the most common sound between the clink of glasses. And at the center of it all was Mia Alvarez, in her black manager's coat, clipboard in one hand, coffee in the other, running the floor like she'd been born to. She didn't bark orders. She didn't hover. She trained by doing, showing up early, checking lines in the kitchen, walking new hires through scenarios no manual could prepare them for. And people followed her, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Her presence had become the blueprint for how this place worked. No drama, no cruelty, no wasted chances. One of those chances was named Lacey. 17, fresh out of a transitional youth program and quieter than most, Lacey had reminded Mia of herself from the very first interview. She wore her hair in a tight bun like it was armor, flinched at raised voices, and always checked the exits when she entered a room. Mia didn't ask questions about her past. She just handed her an apron and said, "First shift's Wednesday. You're not alone here." 3 weeks later, Lacey knew the menu by heart and smiled without apologizing for it. "Watch her," Maria whispered one afternoon as they wiped down the counter. "She's starting to believe she belongs." Mia just nodded. "Good. That's the job." It was late on a Thursday when the reporter showed up. Not with cameras or flashbulbs, but with a clipboard and a voice too polished to trust. Her name was Maren Grant, freelance for a small digital outlet that specialized in stories of resilience. She said she was doing a feature on women in leadership roles and wanted to highlight the Charred Oak as an example of second-chance culture. Her smile was sweet. Her eyes were sharp. Dante had been in the back when he heard the name. By the time Mia stepped out to speak with Maren, Dante had already made a call. "She digs too deep," he said into the phone. "Scraped one of my guys a few years ago. Twisted his story until it barely resembled truth. I'll handle it." But Mia had stepped into the hallway and said, "Let me." Dante paused. "You sure?" She looked at him steady. "I've hidden long enough." The next morning, Mia met Maren at the cafe across the street. She wore a black turtleneck and no makeup. She didn't ask for off-the-records or pre-approvals. She just sat down and said, "If you're going to tell my story, then it needs to be mine. All of it." Maren blinked. "You're sure?" "Yes," Mia replied. "Let's begin." She talked for almost an hour. About foster homes and locked cabinets. About sleeping with shoes on in case she had to run. About stealing sandwiches when she was 13 and spending 2 nights in juvie that felt longer than most years. She told her about Carl. About the slap. About the blood on the floor. About how no one moved except one man. She didn't say Dante's name, but she said what mattered. "I got back up," she said quietly, "and someone saw me do it." That's when everything changed. Maren scribbled notes but never interrupted. When the piece ran, it was titled, "The Woman Who Got Back Up." It went viral in 3 days. People came from out of town just to shake Mia's hand. Survivors. Daughters. Former waitresses who'd stayed silent in kitchens too long. "You said it out loud," one woman whispered through tears. "You made it real." Dante read the article in his office, folded the printout in half, and placed it in a drawer with maybe 3 other things that meant something to him. He didn't say much. Just nodded when Mia walked by and said, "Good work." And that was enough. On a rainy evening 1 week later, Mia stood at the bar with Lacey after closing. They were wiping down the taps, soft jazz drifting from the speakers. "You ever scared?" Lacey asked. "Like, it'll all fall apart?" Mia paused, then looked at her with a smile that was both kind and honest. "Every day," she said. "But I got back up once. I know I can do it again." Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the bar lights glowed warm and gold. Mia set the cloth down, looked out across the empty room, and let herself feel everything: the fear, the pride, the weight of becoming something no one ever thought she could. And then she whispered to no one, or maybe to the girl she used to be, "They thought breaking me would end me." Turns out it was the first time someone saw who I really was. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.